Takiafi. My name is Tashina Banks-Rama.
And I'm Jennifer Irving. We're so excited to welcome you to the very first episode of Stories of Lakota Elders, recorded right here in the studio on the Wópila campus.
Yes, and we're launching this series with someone so deeply loved across our homelands, the incomparable Cecelia Fire Thunder.
Tashina, let's talk a little bit about how this whole journey even began.
You and I both, at different times, felt this responsibility, almost a calling, to record Cecelia's stories. At first, we imagined just capturing them for our families and communities. We had no idea it would grow into a podcast. But as she got more comfortable, she started talking right into the mic, addressing ladies and gentlemen and listeners.
Yeah, she really claimed that space without even trying. She created this rhythm and spirit that shaped this podcast. She really opened the doorway for all of us to come alive.
So for those of you who may not know Cecelia, let's introduce her.
Cecelia Apple Fire Thunder is an enrolled citizen of the Oglala Sioux Tribe. She is originally from Kyle, South Dakota, and she has carried the strength and teachings of her homeland with her throughout her entire life. She is a respected elder, a former Oglala Sioux tribal president, the first woman ever to hold that office, and someone whose leadership is recognized throughout Indian country.
Listeners will hear firsthand her experiences as a Lakota child in the Indian boarding school system, as a teenager navigating federal relocation policies, and as a young mother and nurse working in Los Angeles. Her stories carry wisdom, history, and humanity in such a generous way.
To many, she is a mentor, educator, culture bearer, artist, Lakota language speaker, and a fierce advocate. What I love most is how she talks about her curiosity, the way she asks questions, seeks help, and keeps learning. That's part of what shaped this incredible life she's lived.
And in this opening episode, she begins by sharing her own birth story and teachings about emergence, identity, and the strength of Lakota motherhood.
You are truly in for a treat. Cecelia weaves history, tradition, and if you know her signature humor that makes everything shine.
So sit back, relax, and enjoy the very first episode of Stories of Lakota Elders, Cecelia Fire Thunder.
Abitakepi chanjawashke matbeo chit papina la collegetka matkochangui machapi na washichuchetka Cecelia Apple Fire Thunder na kiaksa tiosh by mataha. And heli mancha na le owayawa ki honey le wa cha le ampetuki le practice on yang takapi chawana chunkote.
Today I just have a simple question, but it's a beautiful story that I have heard you share. So I'll just and maybe we'll ask you this some other time in another interview, but because this is the birth or emerging of our new podcast series or the merging of our story of Cecelia's storytelling, would you tell us your birth story?
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. It's really exciting. Part of who we are is that it takes, later on in your life, you begin to go back. Lakota culture has many levels, and the stories, and not only the stories, but what we call the ceremony that goes with everything. So one of the things is that when people say Lakota culture, it's much more than a story or an event. Our culture begins the day we enter into the world, and this is something that I often wanted to teach more women, especially grandmothers and mothers, so they can teach their children and change the method of birthing in our community. There was a time when there was no doctors and hospitals. There was a time when we Okichapi and Hokshi Ichu, that was the name they gave the midwives, Hokshi Ichu. And in translation, they took the baby. And so we had all these wonderful ceremonies. And I was really fortunate enough to have in my life at that time, maybe 20, 30 years ago, the woman who was there, Imachu. So she was in Washichu, they probably would say the midwife. And in Lakota, she was a Hokshichu. So she delivered over 35 of us, and she was a one feather. Her name was, she was from Inkpata. She was from Kyle. But she married into the, another family. Anyway, I'll get all the names right. But she was alive when I came home in 1987. But I stayed in touch with her because I knew how special she was, and my mom told me all about her. And so when I came home in 1987, one of the first people I went to see was Nellie Reddow. And I took her some gifts, and I said, and so my mother was not with us anymore at that time. So her and Auntie Stella. So Auntie Stella lived across the street from Auntie Nellie in Wakabamni housing, okay? Auntie Stella was married to my Uncle Jim at one time, and she was a black bear from Yellow Bear. So they lived across from each other. So I spent about 4 years with these two women. Oh, they were amazing. My favorite story of Auntie Stella was in Lakota, she said, Ashna katoto na mazas ka chimkeapi. So the first of the month, they knew I got my SSI, my kakosha would all converge on my house, and everybody wanted $5, or somebody needed a tire. And so what I did was, this was amazing. She had her SSI check sent to the Gordon National Bank. And didn't she get a check anymore? And this is what she said. Ata katoto na mazas ka chimkeapi. They all come asking for money. I could say, mazas ka maniche. I don't have any money. She said, then I wasn't lying because I didn't have cash because I put it in the bank. And they were so, anyways, Auntie Stella lived here and Auntie Nellie lived this way. So these two women I spent a lot of time with, driving them around, taking them here and there. And I'm so glad I did that because they told so many stories of beliefs and practices. So what I wanted to do was tell a story because I had heard other women talk about our ceremony. So pregnancy, iglush akapi, in Lakota, pregnancy was iglush aka. She strengthens herself. Or else there's another way people said, iglush ake, that's how we say it. Or hokshiyu hakte, she's going to have a baby. And so iglush aka meant that pregnancy was not a time of illness, but it was a time of strengthening herself. Anyway, so the ceremony was that as you got close to delivery day, the family picked somebody of good character to be at the time at the emergence. The person of good character was going to be the first one to touch the baby as it emerged from the mother, the Wópila, the fontanelle. And the fontanelle, they cover it right away. So kaka bebela hinab hanta. And that's another name they called the midwives. And what she did was she took the mucus out of your mouth so you could take your first breath. And then take your first breath, and then she said, as soon as that baby emerges, they start recording. They look around, see everything they hear and smell and feel. They start recording everything around them because their senses are fine-tuned. She said, she told me, I told you who you were before I cut your umbilical cord. So I knew your family. So ina unchi isam unchi. I went back as far as I could to tell you all the women you came from, and over here I told you atenitana isam. So as far back as I could remember, who your mom and dad were and what family they came from. That was before I cut your umbilical cord. However, before that, as you emerge. And then the fontanelle. So she put her hand on my fontanelle, the prewiwila. That's what they call that, prewiwila. So as you emerged from your mother, my hand and my spirit went into you. Okay. So my spirit came with strength in your spirit as you came into the world because you needed all the help you could have because the world is a tough place. So her spirit entered mine, and then I emerged. And she said that was the ceremony. And then she said, after I cut your umbilical cord, she said, I gave you to your dad. Then the next ceremony was the placenta. The placenta was chamani. Chamani kehewaka. She said that placenta was sacred because for 9 months that placenta protected you. The umbilical cord was hooked up to your mother to give you life. And so when that 9 months ended, she said it's really, in Lakota, she said, Leila, hey, Blukcha, Dakwe Lukcha. She said, how did it know it was time for you to come out? You know, the chemistry that was involved in everything. I said, oh, they put it on the calendar. They pushed that button so you could come out, you know. Anyway, we're laughing about it. So she said the next ceremony was the placenta. And then once the placenta came out, she said, hey, opeminipi. And that they wrapped the placenta up. And sometimes she said the best thing to use was the shirt or something that belonged to the dad or a dress that belonged to the mother and wrap that placenta up. And so she said, hey, Nagu, there was a ceremony. So if there was a tall tree nearby, the father would tie that placenta to the very top of that tree, and they would let the thunder beings know that a new little girl came into this tioshpaya. So my dad tied Shirley, Mary Lou, Wanda, and Carmen placenta to a cottonwood tree near our house in Kyle. And I said, he said, my dad said there was a song they sang to beckon and let the thunder beings know a little girl baby came into the family. So they tied it. And for me, I was born in the sandhills of Nebraska. There's no trees in the sandhills, a lot of bushes, you know. And so what they did, the placenta was then considered sacred, so they had a ceremony to offer it. And then for me, Toby Nellie said, Ash, atamali hechi sandhill, the chawanichio. She said, so we had your dad dig a hole in Inamaka and wrapped your placenta up. And then he gave you to Unchimanka. So she embraced me, and then we covered it up. So the ceremony of the placenta is very meaningful. Because the 9 months, that placenta provided protection. It provided nourishment so you could emerge into the world whole. And if you had a really good, strong pregnancy, you came out healthy. And then the ceremony also connected you to your past. And so my sisters were all given to the Wakia Oyates, the thunder beings. So today I told my dad, I attribute my strength as a Lakota woman because I have the greatest female helper in the universe, Inamaka. And so when I need help, she's the one I go to. And so Inamaka embraced me and took care of me all these years, and everything I've ever done pertained to women. You know, not only health care. For years, I worked on ending violence against women. For years, I worked on child abuse. A lot of work I do is woman-based or women-centered. And working in education is about children and how to provide a better system of learning for our children, because that's a female responsibility. Ina Nelly, na Stella, Black Bear, she said, Nago tiwahe ki lewiyanki topi. She said, the home belongs to the woman. I said, he taku, doshke yakap he. Honey, ti prestola ki he. The teepee, he ata, she said, the buffalo hides. It took 14 buffalo hides. We yanki he tjąáŋka ki aglipina. We butchered it and we skinned the hide. It took 14 to 15 hides sewn together to cover the frame of the teepee. And that was the woman's responsibility. The other thing she said was that everything in that teepee, food, clothing, and shelter, the tjąáŋka gave it to us. The hide to cover the teepee, all the what they call the muscle around the back for the thread, everything we needed. The buffalo gave it to us. She said, and then she said everything, even drying the food, preparing the food for the winter, and drying stuff, buffalo berries, et cetera, et cetera. She said we put them in the hides. Anyway, so she said, in other words, the woman was responsible for food, clothing, and shelter. So at that time, everything in that teepee was woman-based. So hewiyanki tiwaheki tkapi. So today, everything in the house belongs to the woman. I said, Hetchet, to Ochawana HUD houses on Uhapi. Now we have HUD houses, we have log houses. Ash, Hetchana Hela, Hetiwahe. It doesn't matter if you live in a mansion or a log house. Everything in that house belongs to the woman. So we had total control about everything. So what do you do when you don't want a man anymore? Oh, we just put his belongings outside the door. And then say, oh, goodbye. Doksha. And I said, did they ever fight it? Yeah. Lakota Chihanta. He was a real Lakota man. He knew they didn't want him anymore, so he just got his bag and left, Anyway, so it's a lot of humor. But I'm really grateful. And so the birthing ceremony, we need to bring that back. And how we need to take the placentas and bury them or hang them to the top of a tree. Some people told me they would take them during Sundance, too, and do a ceremony. So my two Trakosjas, Katie and Hannah, were born in Bozeman. So I told my son, I said, as soon as she goes into labor, let me know so I can be up there. And be sure and tell the delivery room doctors that the grandma's coming after the placenta. I sent him a little thing on why. Okay, he said. So I went hauled ass to Bozeman, Montana, me and my other son. So she was in labor. We got there just in time. Anyway, so that I had to sign all these release papers, because they never ever released the placenta. The placenta, once it's in the hands of the doctors and nurses, they draw blood from it. And they draw the blood from the placenta, put them in vials, and put dates and names because that blood could be used for research later. Then they take some of the tissues of the placenta and put them in containers and put dates and names on it. In case one day something happens, they could look at the blood and see if there's any genetic anomalies or anything. So they asked me how I wanted it, and I just said, put it in an ice bag, put it in an ice bag. So we bought it, put it in a dry ice, came home, put it in a freezer. Anyway, so here comes Sundance. And so tree day, one of the ceremonies we had at Uncle Rick's was we put my Trakosja girl Katie's placenta, we buried it out to the Sundance grounds. Mm-hmm. So to me, all of the spirits watch over her and take care of her. And then Hannah's placenta, buried it up there as well. So my two Trakosja girls' placentas are buried at Sundance grounds. Symbolically, that's really good because that placenta is who they were. The Mother Earth knows who they are, and all the grandmas and grandpas know who they are. And that was, so the other story of placenta, my sister Carmen, she had 7. I think she had 7 in her freezer. Over only years, all her Trakosja. I said, hey, you better bring it back. I said, they'll turn into ice cubes. Okay. So 3 years ago, before my niece Matilda died, and I said, Carmen's gonna placenta kamaniki akuna dukdel. We're gonna bury them. And so Carmen said, well, let's put them next to Dad's grave in Kyle. And so she came back with her cooler of dry ice and 7 placentas, or 6 placentas. Only years, anyway, she had little containers. So then she came back, and so we had this little ceremony out to where my dad's buried. Put the shade up, and we had food, and all women. Anyway, so anyway, I always remember that day so fondly because it was so special. And so around here's my dad's grave. And so every one of her children whose placenta we had used a post hole digger to like she Rick said, about 3 feet, go down 3 feet. And then take that commonine, the placenta, wrap it up in red cloth and tobacco, and then drop it in, and then cover it up. And so every one of them dug their own little hole, they took their placenta and put it in the hole around my dad's grave. And Matilda, my Koja Matilda, she's not with us anymore, but she knew all kinds of great songs. And we sang songs and everything. And so my dad had his tļáŋkas with him. And the tļáŋkas had their cacao with him. And so these are all the little things, and this is part of culture. And to think that, and so the other thing, let me go back a little bit, Nellie, Auntie Nellie, Red Owl and Nellie, two bulls, a lot of these Winuxchalas, I spent time with them, asking them questions, and they would just add to the story. And what they told me was, this is so funny. How come our young generation is so lawless and disrespectful? So they were so and Nelly Tubal. We want you to hunter IHS Babylon, we try have to now the women go to IHS and go into the delivery room and they put them up on that table and tie them down. When the delivery table, they used to tie your legs down. I thought, gosh, we tried to, and then they tie him down to have the baby. And then when the baby comes out, the first person who touches it and slaps them on the butt is a white guy. So that's why they're all messed up. No. And that makes sense. I mean, so the symbolism of delivery in a gentle way, they came. Anyway, so that's what they were saying. And then the Tamaniki Takto Hunki Sloyamshi. So sometimes we didn't know what happened to the placenta. At that time, in most delivery rooms, they burned it or disposed of it. Mm-hmm. So that was my trigger to start looking at how we can change it. So as of today, Indian Health Service changed their policy. So if a family wants to be in the delivery room, they can be there. And if the family wants to take the placenta, they can. And take it home and go to the ceremony. It makes so much sense for your kamani, your placenta, for 9 months. It kept you alive. And then give it back to Namaka so the spirits and everything is in balance and harmony. I love that. The final story I have to tell you is I'm trying to write a story about a woman. Her name is Mrs. Mary Yalawa from Inkpata. Since I was a little girl, I heard stories of this woman delivering her own babies. Delivered her own babies. She delivered her baby. Anyway, so Ashna, hey, Wógla Kapi said, Lily, gee, that's pretty cool, you know. So about 5 years ago, I talked to her daughter. I said, "Inani talk, honey, huh?" I heard, "Can I talk to you? I'd like to write a story about how your mom delivered her own babies." She didn't deliver just one; she delivered 8 of us at home. Hey, my mom had this little in Inkpata log house on Heisaki. She put up a tent. When she was ready to go into labor, then she sent us off to play. She delivered 8 of us at home by herself.
Wow.
8 of them.
Amazing.
So we go off and play, and we come home to be a little baby.
Wow.
And so to think that it was not a medical condition or a medical situation, that it was a normal process to have a child, and we learned what to do. Mm-hmm. You know? And so I started to write that story, and her son is helping me now. He's still alive, but I think that's an amazing story. But when you go back to Ella Delorio's book, what was that book about? You know, it's all in Lakota and how they left the camp, and she was Iglush Ake. And then they left the camp, but she got her bag.
Is that the book, Water Lily?
Huh? Water Lily.
Water Lily.
In Water Lily, there's a segment in there where they were breaking camp and they were going to another camp. And she took her little bag of stuff and they took off. Pretty soon she left the entourage, I guess you call it. She left and went over here. In the meantime, they kept going. They set up camp. And later she showed up with a baby.
Wow.
So she left to go and have her baby. Mm-hmm. Then she came back and went back to camp. So here is the teaching. Having a baby and delivering your baby was normal. Think of all the animals that do that. The four-legged, the kitty cats and puppies, they all have their babies and they don't have a doctor there or delivery room nurse. I thought they'd take care of their baby. Humans. So we remove that power away from us. So, honey, all the women delivered their own babies or they had other women helping them. And that is such an amazing part of who we are. And so today, when you think about it, those how can I describe it? Those power that we had to be self-sufficient and so whatever was removed from us by Western society. So being pregnant and having a baby, they made it into a medical condition. But then you think about, then somebody said, well, what about the infant mortality? How many of them died? I said, well, I don't know that answer. I really don't. But I think that the story is how Lakota women delivered their own babies. And then, or the women collectively helped each other have babies. And that to me is part of who we are as Lakota women. We had this amazing inner strength. How do I say it? Kawachi Usutapi. We have strong will. And having a baby was normal. It wasn't a medical condition. Isn't that cool or what? So anyway, so this is an important part of ownership. And for young girls to hear this, to be able to then go and value their bodies. And then the other piece, this is for a later podcast, is to determine when you want to be a mother, when you're going to have a child, when you're going to become pregnant. Those are all part of the discussion of ownership of our bodies.
Wow.
Well, that was awesome.
That was a wonderful emergent story to begin this podcast series.
Emerging is a powerful word. You emerge from your mother into this world. You emerge versus something other in the end. So that and all the stuff that goes with it. Yeah, and it's just an amazing story. It's for some of those of us who emerged out of our mothers. 5 out of 7 girls in my family were born at home.
Wow.
Yeah, so my dad, we used to tease my other 2 sisters that were born in the hospital. Oh, we know. I said, oh, you're just somehow because some white guy hit you first. Some white guy slapped you on the butt to make you cry. But unfortunately, I worked in the delivery room, and that's what they did. Because they would take you out and suction your mouth to get the mucus out so you could breathe. And then they had that light. Remember, they put you under the light, and then they would make sure that you were alive to hit you on the butt and you cry. So that was the first act of violence our babies experienced, So anyway, yeah. So we have to then change the next generation to,
There are so, I mean, I don't know, maybe Jen knows, but I don't know of many women, not just Lakota women, but indigenous women in general who know the native or indigenous birthing practices. That's like a craft or that's being lost to the generations, right? So
yeah, there are places around Indian country where those things are coming back. So if you think of like the Haudenosaunee in New York, they have birthing centers, some Anishinaabe communities, and down in the Southwest, some of the Pueblo communities down there, where they have birthing centers with options for traditional birth, but I mean, at least they're starting with the birthing center.
Yeah.
So
I try to remember Loretta Cook's sister-in-law.
yeah.
They've been doing
Gudgy.
Yeah, Kachi. And they've been doing this for years, and they've been trying to bring it back to all tribal communities, to bring that back. When I gave a talk about 4 months ago in Rapid City, a big maternal child health gathering, and the most important part of this gathering was to really bring back traditional birthing methods. And the other thing, and then nurse midwives. So really promoting RNs to be midwives so they can deliver babies at home. You don't have to come to the hospital if you have a really normal pregnancy. So this Navajo lady said, she said, I became RN and I went on and became a midwife, and I actually delivered a baby in a Hogang. and with no IV poles or nothing. And the baby came out. It was a healthy pregnancy, so the baby was healthy. So all the elder women were there guiding me how to handle the placenta and stuff. She said, my first delivery in a hogan. So it's possible.
Yeah.
So
It's
it's
totally
possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, the final thing is, so Geraldine Church had a little work group. She asked us too, what do you want to see at the new Oyate Health Center? So what we said, for us, we like to see a traditional birthing room. To have a birthing room where there's no IV poles and that we can have on the floor, and then have her family come to women, and so just have her baby naturally on the floor. You don't have to put them on a table or anything. So that's one of the plans for the Oyalta Health Center, to have a birthing room that's going to be like a long time ago, but then have her female relatives be there with her.
Yeah.
And yeah. I think it's doable. But I think we also need to make sure the babies are made by two Lakotas.
Hey.
Lakota egg and a Lakota sperm. I mean, if you have that, you can't go wrong. Hey. Now we're getting silly here.
Now we're getting silly. Well, is there anything else before we close out you want to share with people about this birthing story or a birthing teaching? If there's expecting moms out there you wanted to share something with, what would you tell them?
Well, it's Charlotte Blackout and I have wonderful conversations about this type of stuff. I think the most important thing is calm. Have the mother, while in her pregnancy state, be in a calm environment, because those babies can hear you, noise, fighting, the vibration of that can come through your umbilical, your placenta, your body, and the babies can hear everything. So the most important thing is provide a quiet, safe environment while you're pregnant. And she said, also, we have a list of things you shouldn't eat, So anyway, so there are lots of little articles out there, and perhaps this podcast can move us into creating some kind of a brochure or pamphlet to help Lakota women who are pregnant on what you should do to protect yourself and the environment you're in while you're pregnant. And then they always say, stay busy. When you're pregnant, be making stuff, learn how to cook, duale, because, again, a lot of girls don't know how to cook. So, and we're teaching them in quiet times, learn how to cook and do beadwork, because stay busy. And a lot of women say they prepared for their baby. They made blankets and little moccasins. And then, so the other piece is, another part of this is after birth is that, the placenta is your umbilical cord. And how sacred that umbilical cord is. A lot of people say, why is it sacred? I said, dang, that was hooked up to your mom and kept you alive. And so we have lots of little ceremonies for the umbilical. Remember when it falls off. How many of you remember having to check your baby? Make sure that it dried up and it didn't fall off. So you kept it and put it in two pouches. One was a lizard, right? What was the other pouch? Turtle, yeah, male, female. And in that little, that stayed, and you gave that, they hung it on the crib or someplace near. What a wonderful symbolism. And that connected to your mother for 9 months and kept you alive. All of these little pieces that go with us. And it's amazing how this has to be part of a curriculum, I think. So just make sure, well, first of all, let somebody know you're pregnant. So a lot of girls don't tell anybody until they're 2-3 months into the pregnancy. And then don't be ashamed or afraid. Let somebody know you're pregnant. And then so the family can come around and help you during your pregnancy. And to make sure you have the love and support that you're going to need. And make sure you're eating the right things too, And so it's about sharing it. But the most important message I want to leave people is plan your pregnancy. What? I say, yeah. Don't wait. Don't get pregnant too young. Wait till you're in your maybe 20s. And then I also support and really promote birth control. You know, it's okay to have sex. You don't have to get pregnant. There's nothing wrong with that. Especially you all know with your hormones. Y'all can all say, yeah, my hormones got in the way, you know. So it's best to know your hormones can overpower your common sense, right? And so it's always good to provide good information to prevent a pregnancy. And then when you're ready to be pregnant, you don't have to do it anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So a long time ago, I think they also taught us the responsibility of pregnancy. So you didn't just have babies left and right. Final story. These are young bears. This is the other thing is I went to a lot of older people in community. Every time they saw me coming, they would hide because I would ask them hard questions. So I want to leave you with this, and this is about the personal responsibility. As long as she was breastfeeding, there was no sexual intercourse. And so you could breastfeed for 1 to 2 or to 3 years. And at no time, as long as that baby needed you, they didn't have sexual intercourse. So they had natural birth control. So they spaced their babies 2 to 3 years apart. Mm-hmm. And this was something I asked a lot of the older women, So in psychology, we all know psychology, birth to 3 is the most important time of a child's life. That's when they feel the connection and nurturing and blah, blah, blah. That's the foundation for the rest of their life. God, we were psychology majors 200 years ago, but we knew that, right? Mm-hmm. So use common sense. So they didn't have another child until that baby stood up. So I always ask women, how many of your moms, how many of you remember the first time your baby stood up? How did you feel? I cried, you know? So that's because Siebert says, that's when they become a boy or girl. That's when they start becoming independent, walking. Yeah? And then so I asked them, these older men, about the 3-year thing, and they said, yeah. So they honored, yeah.
Which is interesting because biologically, women need about 2 to 3 years for their bodies to recover as well.
Yeah.
Because your body becomes so depleted, like calcium and all the, so they always say, like, for women to, like, in later in life, not have osteoporosis, that kind of thing, like, to give yourself, your body a chance to heal and to replenish those calcium, especially calcium. There's other things, but so it's interesting how it all, like, it's not just these beliefs and teachings, but there's like biological
connection.
Yeah.
A biological connection, chemistry collection. I mean, dang, we were smart. We knew everything, and then they came and messed it up. So anyway, that's just another part of what I learned is that we know they space their babies 2 to 3 years apart because that's when they're the most sacred. And that's the foundation of lifelong learning, what they do in the first couple of years. Yeah. And then, so when I asked, the reason they mentioned it was, too many of the women were having babies within 1 or 2 years, but they weren't getting the kind of nurturing and teaching they needed, And they talked, so that's the psychology of what? The man, we were smart. What do you think? We just got dumber. Gee.
Well, we'll get there.
We'll get there. Watch that. Pila my out, PJ. They're pushing my buttons today. You know what? I have to tell you, I forget I'm an elder. I mean, maybe I'm in denial. I'm not ready to move into that realm, so I have to then look like an elder. Grow my hair, wear long braids, and wear long dresses, and you know what I'm saying. Anyway, so the symbolism of an elder, I sometimes say, okay, I'm an elder. Well, how come I don't feel like I'm an elder? Then you don't have to. You just have to be glad you're alive.
Be yourself.
Be yourself. Yeah. Pila maya. Did you learn something you didn't know today?
Because me gusta means I'm done.
How
do you say we're done?
I gustampi.
Wópila tją́ka, thank you so much for joining us for this first episode of Stories of Lakota Elders.
It is such a gift to sit with Cecelia and hear these teachings in her own voice. Her stories remind us who we are, where we come from, and the strength our ancestors carried forward.
We hope today's conversation offers something meaningful for you a memory, a teaching, or even just a moment of connection.
There is so much more to come. Cecelia's journey continues in the next episode as she jumps into her time as a boarding school student at Holy Rosary Mission. And we can't wait to share more of her stories, wisdom, and humor with all of you.
From all of us here at Machpealuta, thank you for listening.
Doksha Ake. See you next time.
Stories of Lakota Elders is an independent podcast recorded at Machpealuta Studios on the Machpealuta campus in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. This project is supported in part by the Better Way Foundation, with studio support from South Dakota Public Broadcasting, and editing, sound design, and production support from our friends at Podtex. You can listen to Stories of Lakota Elders wherever you get your podcasts.